Say you cannot judge a book by its cover, but today's story, featuring this elderly lady, had a heck of a cover. Dorothea Puente is her name. Dorothea on the surface was an elderly lady doing charity in the neighborhood, cooking for people, the less privileged people in the neighborhood every Wednesday. She also ran a boarding house where she was housing the elderly, vulnerable people, mentally disabled people. So on the surface, she did really look like a good woman. However, Dorothea was killing her tenants and burying their dead bodies in her garden. Hello and welcome to my channel, Storytime with Stars TV. Over here, I talk about true crime stories, love scam stories, entertainment stories, intriguing stories, and everything in between. If you've already subscribed to this channel, thank you very much. If you haven't subscribed and you love a good story, then please click the subscribe button as well as the notification bell, so every time I upload a new story, you will be notified. I upload new stories every week. Right. Get yourself a cup or a glass of your favorite drink. Grab a seat, relax, and let's dive into today's story. In the 1980s in Sacramento, there lived an elderly lady called Dorothea Puente. Dorothea Puente was running a boarding house for vulnerable people, mentally disabled people in Sacramento. So in 1988, early 1988, a social worker by name Jude referred this guy called Montayo, who was mentally disabled, to this lady's boarding house to find a place for him to stay. He wasn't American. He was like from Mexico or something. I could tell from the interview that Jude had with him before taking him to Dorothea's house that he was probably from Mexico or a foreigner or something like that, because he could barely speak English. And in the beginning, when she took him there, in the beginning everything seemed okay. He had his own room, he had his own bed, he had his TV, his chair. It looked like a cool place for him to settle down and live his life. Jude was happy. She had found him a lovely place. So after a few weeks, Jude contacted Dorothea and said, "Oh, I'd like to check in and see how Beth is doing." And Dorothea was like, "Oh, Beth is not around. Beth's gone to Mexico." Jude was like, "When is he going to come back?" Beth said, "He'll be back on Friday." So on Friday, Jude calls again, and Beth's like, "Oh, he's not back. He's going to be back on Sunday." Sunday, Jude calls and said, "Oh, actually, he's returned, but he's gone to his family." And Jude decided to call one of the family members that she knew. She called the family member, and he was like, "Beth is not here. Nobody's gone to Mexico, and Beth is not here either." So Jude called Dorothea back and said, "I'm going to come to your place, and if I come and Jude isn't there, I'm going to go to the police and report him missing." So the day came, she went to Beth, was nowhere to be found. So she contacted the police and reported the whole thing to the police and asked the police to go there and go check on Beth. The police went to the house, and because of the way Dorothea presents herself, Dorothea was in her 60s, but she always presented herself like a much older lady. She dressed and talked and spoke and just appeared like somebody in her 80s or 90s, and she did that for a reason. So when the police got there, she was like, "Oh, Beth's not here. You can come inside and look around." They did enter the property. Truly, Beth wasn't there. So they went back and told Jude that Beth isn't there. Let's give it a while. And Jude was like, "No, I don't believe this. Please go back there." She insisted, "Please go back there. And when you're going back, please go with shovels, go with spades, and check everywhere. Search her garden, search everywhere you can search." So the police went back to Dorothea's house. She had pasted on her kitchen wall, a calendar, and on the calendar she had written on a certain date, Beth left the house to try and convince anybody that comes into the property that truly Beth had left the house and Beth wasn't in the house. Beth's gone. Beth's within the 10. So the police said, can we go into your garden? And she was like, oh, why do you want to go into the garden? Said, we want to search the garden. They started trying to dig the garden. So when they started to dig the garden, Dorothea came to them and said to them, oh, because of how a lot of you around here, I'm beginning to feel a little bit nervous. Can I go across the road and get myself a cup of coffee? There truly was a cafe across the road. So she said, can I just quickly go there and get myself a cup of coffee? The officer was like, why not? You can go. And because of how she is, he didn't think anything of it. So Dorothea left the house to go get herself coffee. As they were digging, the officer came across a bone. He pulled it out, somebody's leg. He continued to dig, a body. Then the other officer said, hey, where is Dorothea? And she said she was going to get herself a cup of coffee. He said, quickly go and get her. Quickly get hold of her. He went out to the cafe, came back and said, Dorothea isn't there. I can't find Dorothea. So it was at that moment it dawned on the officer that said, you can go, that Dorothea has disappeared, has run away. So they continued to dig. They found not just one body, they found 2. They kept digging, they found 3, body number 3. They kept digging, body number 4. They kept digging, body number 5, number 6, number 7. They found 7 bodies in her garden. So she just vanished. They couldn't find her. So the police put out a search warrant for her. She was all over the news. She was in the papers. They were looking for her. This whole thing opened a new kind of worms. People started contacting the police. People who knew her started contacting the police and telling their stories with her. So one guy called the police and said some years back, before she opened the boarding school, she used to rent out, using the property, to elderly people. She had a certain group of people that she would rent her property out to. She didn't rent it out to just anybody. If you were like a foreigner with no family, she would rent it out to you. Single parents, elderly people. She deliberately selected these people. So this guy says the man who moved in there, and then within a few weeks, at that time, Dorothea was pretending to be a medical doctor. Sometimes she would pretend she was a nurse, injecting people with stuff, strange stuff, walk around with a medical bag, stethoscope around her neck. Dorothea was a real criminal. And within a few weeks of moving in there, Mom started getting really ill. She was getting weaker and weaker, but Dorothea would assure them that she was going to take good care of her. She's fine, she'll be well. What she was actually doing was poisoning her slowly. She was putting sedatives, overdoses of it in her drinks, and then gradually she died. Her death was passed off, was reported as an overdose of some medication of some sort. In those days, they didn't have what they have now, these modern technical stuff to really, really investigate and look into things. So she got away with a lot of crimes. And Dorothea has been married 4 times, so she had several names. Sometimes she was called Dorothea Puente, sometimes she was called Dorothea something else. So she was using all these names to con her way out of the system. Then after that guy's mom, Ruth, died, Dorothea started doing prostitution as well, and she was dragging her clients. She went out with this guy. The guy took her out for a drink. Then the guy took her to his house. When they got to his house, Dorothea put some stuff in his drinks and then stole his watch, stole some stuff in his house and ran away. But she didn't get away with that one. She was arrested, she was charged and convicted, sentenced to 5 years imprisonment. She spent about 3 years in prison, and when she came out, she connected with a 77-year-old retiree and told him she wanted to turn over a new leaf, pretending that she's now a holy person. The guy's name was Gilmer. She hired a handyman to build a box for her, a box like in the shape of a coffin. Once the box was built, she asked Gilmert to move into her house with her, to come live with her. And then Gilmert moved into Dorothea's house. Few weeks after moving in, Gilmert started getting ill, getting weak, and then Gilmert also died. Dorothea put his body in the box that she had built and disposed of it in a river near her property. So basically, what Dorothea was doing was she was targeting these vulnerable people, elderly people, foreigners, people who didn't have close relations, single parents, getting them into her home. She was also targeting her clients, as well as these elderly men, very old men that she was dating. She would then poison them gradually and kill them. Then she would wrap their bodies with bed sheets or plastic and bury them in her garden. This went on for quite some time. People were just disappearing. Tenants were just disappearing under strange, mysterious circumstances that nobody really could understand. She would just tell people, these people came, but they have left. They've gone back to their families. Her main motive for doing all this was to cash their social security checks. Once they disappear, then she takes over their benefits and she was cashing it out herself. It's believed she made over $100,000 from this venture. And then she would donate their clothing to charities. She would donate some of the monies to charities. She would donate some monies to political leaders in the community. So in the community, she came across as a very lovely, kind woman who was actually out helping everybody. This was a way of making it almost impossible for anyone to suspect her. There were times other tenants would complain to her that they could smell a really foul smell in the garden. There was a really bad odor coming in. Then she would tell them, oh, it's the sewage. It's problems with the sewage. I'll sort it out. It was after this whole thing that Dorothea decided to open the boarding house. So now this takes us back to the first story of Bert, the mentally disabled guy that moved into Dorothea's property, and Jude sent the police to go investigate, and then they found out that she had buried 9 bodies, including Bert's body, in her backyard. So she was still missing. Then one day the police got a call from somebody and said she had seen somebody like Dorothea, because her pictures were all over, was on TV and everything. He said he had seen somebody like Dorothea at this location in Los Angeles. So the police immediately, they flew to Los Angeles and they went there and arrested her and put her back on a plane, sent her back to Sacramento. Dorothea, when she realized it was over for her, she said to the police, I'm very sorry. I used to be a very good person at some point. I don't know what happened. Charged with 9 counts of murder and convicted of 3 murders. Their defense was that they died in their sleep. And because she had previous convictions, she was afraid to call the police. And so she just went ahead and cashed their checks. She was sentenced to life in prison, and she spent the rest of her life in prison. And in 2011, she died at the age of 82 years. Dorothea's story goes to show that appearances can be very deceptive, and that safety assessments shouldn't be based on appearances alone. It should be based on evidence rather than just appearance. You cannot always judge a book by its cover. What have you also learned from this story? Share what you've learned in the comment section. Share the story with other people. If you haven't subscribed, please hit the subscribe button. I'll come your way again next week with another story. Take care.